So there I was, about to start working on a review for the movie Top Gun, when I stumbled on an interesting anime involving aircraft in a fantasy setting. It's a relatively obscure little bugger called Simoun, or at least it's obscure to the crowd of anime fans I'm used to, but it's probably more well known than I've been told. Why else would there be two different subtitled variants floating in the internet, each with different spellings of certain character names, and that occasionally word sentences differently, if mostly keeping the same meaning? You wouldn't know by the cover art that there's a serious war going on. The North American cover, well, it looks like the two main characters are nude, and I don't know what they're doing together. Now, considering the fact that the title, Simoun, is for a flying machine of surprisingly destructive power, I would have thought that would have made it to the cover art here in the States. Granted, the voice cast is all female, which means most of the characters are female, and those who technically aren't will have a feminine-sounding voice. I say technically because this world is a very strange way of handling genders. Everyone is born as a girl and chooses what sex they'll be for the rest of their lives when they reach 17. Usually, anyway. Since Simouns can only be piloted by those who haven't chosen yet for some reason, the official reason given is that these are priestesses, and they need to be innocent to do their job, and they're in the middle of a war. The pilots who have hit the cutoff age are given the choice to keep fighting for their country or officially become adults. There's an unexpected consequence for not picking a gender for too long, but talking about that just feels too much like a spoiler, though. Add in the fact that each aircraft is turned on when both pilots of the aircraft kiss each other, and yeah, this one's a little quirky. It's not that it's a bad series, not by any stretch, but if you aren't a fan of personal drama in a series and prefer straight-up action, this is gonna be painful. The occasional catfight over who got to fly with a particularly popular pilot, the blatant double standard, where girls can practically rape someone, and at most get a stern talking to before they're back on the front line as if nothing happened, while men can barely even talk to one of these characters because they might remove their purity as priestesses. For God's sakes! That girl isn't interested in you. You do not have the right to pin her to the ground and shove your tongue down her throat. This is not a show for children, though it's, strangely enough, not one for perverts either. There's surprisingly little fan service considering how it's advertised. Sure, there are a few moments that would fall under sexual assaults, but there's no gratuitous sex or nudity here. You've got some translucent bodysuits that somehow help these girls fly in a special air pool, for lack of a better term, but they cover everything important. When they choose their genders, they generally have to walk through a pool, but they're reasonably covered. And while their flight suits are tailored for them right down to their breast sizes, I've seen much worse on far more busty women than this series will throw at us. There's a good deal of character development as the series goes on, and even the most impulsive decisions feel understandable since the show takes the time to give us a very intimate feel for each character's motivations, thoughts, dreams, and emotions. But it takes me a while to start liking more than just one character, which kind of surprised me in a series that is so utterly driven by the characters. The series has a surprisingly slow start for something that showed the war was getting a lot more serious pretty much at the starting gate. The one character I like from the start, Nevril, has plenty of reason to want to leave the ship by the start of episode 2. Her previous co-pilot was lost in battle, though the scene it happens in is edited in such a way that it wasn't immediately obvious. And it's hard to say if that girl was killed or just fell from the hatch at some point and might return later in the series. Neville also saw into the eyes of one of the people she killed, which probably isn't helping, since she starts off refusing to use military terms. She joined as a damn priestess for religious reasons. As much as I'd like to continue talking about her journey through the series, if I don't stop now, I'll be too tempted to tell her entire story. And in a series this character-centric, watching as someone falls apart, puts themselves back together, falls apart again, and all around tries to stay true to herself and her beliefs in a world that feels determined to break her spirit or outright kill her, is a good deal of the fun. And I'm not denying anyone the chance to go through this ride on their own. A number of other characters start off feeling like bland schoolgirls, or just failing to catch my interest until several episodes later. Can't really find it in me to blame the characters for that, though. We start off with a fairly large cast right from the get-go, and the story is so busy trying to introduce the entire world that anyone outside of a few very plot-specific individuals gets the short end of the stick. Now, it's typically a good idea to start off with a few characters and slowly introduce more as necessary, but this show decided to throw in plenty in episode 1. Took me a while to associate a few characters with certain names, and I get the feeling I've already forgotten some of them. Not because the story is badly written or the characters unmemorable. It probably has more to do with the fact that when I watched it, I kind of had to switch between the two main translations, and if I wanted to keep track of who was who, I had to open up a cast list. I could keep track of the ones I had already kept my eyes on, but if I didn't already feel some kind of connection with a character, and their name kept switching spellings on me in the subtitles, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to remember them even if they were damn awesome at times. It's not the show's fault. It's the fact that the site I found the show on had some broken video links at the time. And if I found the next episode, it might not have been the same translation team's work. Anyway, enough of that short venting session, back to the review. Each character goes through her own journey, and even the ones that piss you off at some point will find ways to earn your respect. These are still kids and teenagers going through a rough war as one of the most important pieces of their country's war effort. Even the best of them is going to be indecisive at times, or make her own stupid mistakes, but nothing they do feels completely out of the blue once you get to know them. You might still get pissed at some of their actions, but nobody feels as hateful as Frank Burns at a mash. Speaking of not liking something, I can't forgive the fact that one of the new recruits, Air, yes, one of the characters in this Air Squadron is called Air, though it's constantly pronounced Airu, and half the time spelled with that pronunciation in mind. But anyway, this girl needs absolutely everything explained to her. She needs to be told that everyone's a priestess, not a soldier. She needs to be told who Neville is, when she's the most famous of the girls on the ship, and before the events of episode 1 is known as the absolute best when it comes to Simoun's. And it immediately gets it in her head to become partners with Neville, just because she wants to fly with the best before she's even gotten a chance to prove herself. She needs to be told what the patterns in the sky they draw are, despite the fact that she flew in such a pattern less than a minute before. Look, I get it. She joined as a soldier and not a priestess like everyone else, and she's new to the crew. It probably wouldn't be so painful if it weren't for the fact that there is another young girl who arrived at the same time, who looks significantly younger, but doesn't need nearly as much explained to her, if anything at all. Does nobody think to brief this girl before they assigned her to one of the most prestigious squadrons in the country? I know they're starting to grow desperate and Air's got talent, but come on! I don't like having to question the IQ of a central character simply because the show needed an excuse to explain things that should be common knowledge at her age in this world. Either make it make more sense that she's ignorant, or explain things to someone who could plausibly not know all this. Like the kid! And despite the fact that she knows so little that even the audience probably caught on faster than her, when she's been living in this country her whole life, and we've had less than 40 minutes of show to go on, she thinks she can fly with the most idolized person on the ship, without anyone having any problem with that. Sure, she's great for someone who's only just gotten into the cockpit and never touched the things before in her life, and I get that she joined as a soldier, not a priestess. But she still rubs me the wrong way from the start, and rubs just about everyone else the wrong way with her lack of respect spawned from ignorance. She started growing on me by episode 3, and I came to like the bonds she formed with Nevril, but not the best introduction. Kinda gave me bad memories of a certain Final Fantasy character.
The precepts must be obeyed! Like I care!
And yes, plenty of my complaints are about the first few episodes. I had to struggle to get through the beginning of the series, since I liked the premise, but had several problems with the execution. There are interesting details spread all over it, and I sympathized with the antagonists and the defending nation right from the start. But bloody hell, did it take me a while to feel some traction for this one. The only other complaint I have is that while the storytelling did pick up in a big way and the animation is beautiful, the music is often bland and ignorable. Seems pretty strange since the Simouns tend to dance across the sky that the music they dance to never sticks to your memory. And while there are several very memorable moments, the music doesn't feel like it enhances them. If anything, our moments are probably better off with no music at all. Let's talk about the aircraft in this series for a bit, since they are what the series is named for. The Simoun themselves have no guns. Their main method of striking back is drawing glyphs in the air, and somehow, when those glyphs are complete, they create rather colourful explosions. Certainly a unique way to attack, though I prefer the straightforward machine gun fire of the invading armies. One thing that got me chuckling was the fact that neither side seems to have radios, so the best way to talk to one another is either opening the canopy up and yelling, or being connected to the aircraft you want to talk to. I know this is supposed to be a fantasy setting, and the antagonists use zeppelins, but really? When I see one side with a goddamn flying aircraft carrier, I expect to see at least World War II level communications technology on one side of the war. And the main aircraft carrier our heroes work in for a good deal of the series, called the Arcus Prima, was a former luxury liner, so it looks a good deal more fancy than you'd expect a military aircraft to be, which makes the Zeppelins the enemy launch their more basic fighters from look even more dull in comparison. Speaking of technology, that is actually the main reason the war is going on. Other countries want the technology that the theocracy of Simulacrum have, and where Simulacrum thinks of them as the chariots of the gods, and that any sane enemy who doesn't want to go to hell will flee at the mere sight of them. Everyone else sees them as highly advanced machines to bring down and analyze. No cost is too great for the chance to harness the technology that Simulacrum refuses to share, even if it's in an incomplete, bullet-riddled form. At the very least, they've begun to learn how to counter the Simoun's main attack by flying as close to the glyphs as they can before they're finished, disrupting and cancelling them out. And as good as the Simouns are, the combined facts that they can only be piloted by relatively young people, and the enemy outnumbers them by absurd amounts, makes the war feel like it's a foregone conclusion. And the thing is, I got the sense the war is a foregone conclusion from episode 1. They showed that the supposedly invincible Simouns were not actually unbeatable super machines in the very first fight in the show. Sure, they still felt impressive. It's hard to make something this much faster and more maneuverable than the enemy feel pathetic, but I can't help thinking they should have had an episode or two of them being the undisputed lords of the skies before their supposed invincibility was crushed. And there was apparently a massive sale on these lower-tech aircraft. The enemy keeps throwing hundreds, if not thousands of them again and again, with no sign that they'll ever run out. Still, the ending of the series is pretty damn good, if bittersweet, and most of the plot lines are closed pretty neatly. If this was a major hit series like Evangelion, maybe something classic that's part of a sequential group of series like Macross, or just something that really hit me where it counts, I'd possibly go into more detail, but considering my feelings on this series, this feels like just enough info to introduce people to it, and, well, it's 26 episodes long, about 25 minutes each. Give it a try. It might surprise you once you get by the rocky beginning.